Please welcome Jennifer Downey, Executive Director of Bedford Ocean Cluster.
Good morning, it's so great to see you all. On behalf of the New Bedford Ocean Cluster Board of Directors, staff, members, and partners, it is a pleasure to welcome and host you here in historic downtown New Bedford for our second annual Offshore Wind Conference. We are excited to once again bring together industry leaders, local businesses, and other important stakeholders at the center of advancing offshore wind in our unique port city. After many years of planning, advocating, and strategically leveraging many marine industry advantages, we've positioned ourselves as a leading hub for the American offshore wind industry. Indeed, the city of New Bedford has been for generations tied to the sea. Like the days of whaling, our cities and businesses are beginning to once again light the world and advance a new ocean industry that promises wealth and prosperity for its citizens. We have so much to celebrate since last year. The nation's first commercial-scale offshore wind project, Vineyard Wind 1, is well into construction. The project, which is running through the New Bedford Marine Commerce Terminal right here in the Port of New Bedford, has created thousands of good-paying, high-quality jobs, has drawn new companies from diverse areas of the supply chain to our growing Blue Economy cluster, and has helped to create positive momentum for future projects. Recently, in a first-of-its-kind tri-state offshore bid, the state of Massachusetts and Rhode Island announced that it would purchase 2,878 megawatts of power. Massachusetts selected 2,678 megawatts in total from 3 projects. The selection is New England's and Massachusetts' largest offshore wind procurement to date, representing 20% of the Commonwealth's overall electricity demand, and marking sustained leadership and commitment for offshore wind generation and supply chain development by the state. And most significant, as we gather here today in New Bedford, the city, the port, and our area supply chain will continue to play a leading role with these new projects. Ocean Winds will develop South Coast Wind 1 and will use the New Bedford Marine Commerce Terminal for marshaling and will base its operations and maintenance right here in the Port of New Bedford. Avangrid has committed to locating an O&M hub for its New England Wind 1 project here in New Bedford at Shoreline Offshore. And Vineyard Offshore will develop their Vineyard Wind 2 project and will station operations and maintenance of the project in the Port of New Bedford and the new Foss Marine Terminal. I think that deserves another. With that, I want to say a few words about the New Bedford Ocean Cluster and how we are working with our growing members of industry partners to advance offshore wind and other marine industries in New Bedford and throughout the region. The MBOC is the only cluster organization within Massachusetts with an intentional focus on the integration and advancement of traditional ocean industries like commercial fishing, with emerging industries such as offshore renewable energy, aquaculture, and marine technology. We maintain a diverse global network critical to accelerating and scaling ocean energy and food security to bring greater resilience to our coastal communities. These stakeholders include ocean technology startups, marine business associations, ocean and supply chain cluster groups, workforce development associations, academia, NGOs, innovators, and a growing collection of industry partners. The MBOC facilitates networking, connections, and collaboration between marine industry stakeholders through business-to-business focused events and programs like today's conference. Our Ag Local program, launched in partnership with Vineyard Wind, is supporting the development of a diverse and equitable supply chain for offshore wind through outreach, direct assistance to local businesses, and industry matchmaking. And we look forward to supporting Avangrid and South Coast Wind and their contractors to support their local content and community engagement goals and associated work scopes. The cluster also serves as an industry convener to support the growth of its pillars. Our industry advisory committees are becoming active platforms for discussion and cross-industry coordination. Together, we aim to support and launch initiatives that can address shared business challenges and facilitate new market opportunities that will lead to business growth and the launch of new ocean technologies. While we have much to celebrate since our inaugural conference last year, we know that we have so much work ahead to ensure we continue our clean energy transition and create a new American industry that can create stronger local economies that will benefit all members of our diverse society. We created this conference because we know how important these forums are for industry growth, and we also know how important it is to host these events where the industry is actually taking place and taking shape, so that you can connect with the actual folks on the ground doing the actual hard work to make this industry a reality. Over the next 2 days, we're here to network, learn from one another, and celebrate and share how the offshore wind industry is developing in New Bedford and the region. During the event, you will not just hear about how New Bedford is positioning itself to lead in offshore wind, but you will experience it up close. We have designed this event to be more intimate industry gathering with an agenda that is immersive and engaging, with multiple tours and program sessions across 4 focus areas: supply chain development, workforce development, innovation and technology, and ports and vessels. We're excited for all of you to be here and for the valuable learning and new connections that will no doubt occur over the next couple of days. Of course, none of this would be possible without the generosity and hard work of so many people. Few know this until they actually start working with us closely, but the MBOC is a very small team of just 3, and that includes me. To put on an event like this takes a tremendous amount of time and energy. I want to thank Carlos Avila, the MBOC's Business Development Manager, and Gabriella Kearns, our new Outreach and Event Assistant, for their hard work and commitment to making this event a success. Can we give Carlos a round? When you have a moment, scan the QR code on the back of your badge and check out the impressive lineup of speakers here with us over the next couple of days. Our contributing speakers are local and global leaders with rich industry experience. I want to thank them all for their time and valuable contribution to this year's event. Finally, I want to thank our amazing sponsors. First, I want to thank our premier sponsor for today's conference and close partner to the MBOC, Vineyard Wind. In addition to today's conference, Vineyard Wind was central to launching our Act Local Supply Chain Development Program. I want to thank Avangrid for your sponsorship of this evening's cocktail reception. We really appreciate your support and partnership. Thank you to our lanyard sponsor, South Coast Wind. Again, very grateful for your support and engagement with the MBOC in this conference. I want to thank our lunch sponsor, Semco Maritime, for your continued support and contribution to our conference again this year. Thank you, Semco. Thank you to the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, a close partner to the MBOC, for your continued support again this year by sponsoring our Sunset Port Tour later this evening. Thank you so much. Thank you to our snack sponsors, Open Cape and Attentive Energy. We are eager to develop deeper connections with both of your great companies. Thank you for your support. And finally, thank you to our banner sponsors, Coastline Transfers, Windworks, Atlantic Oceanic, Fathom Resources, Rotec, Spirit Advisory, and UMass Dartmouth. Okay, and now, it is an honor to have the opportunity to introduce our first speaker this morning, Mayor of the City of New Bedford, John Mitchell. Mayor Mitchell has been deeply immersed in the development of U.S. offshore wind since the first days of his administration more than 12 years ago. This was well before the industry started to develop here in New Bedford. The mayor came into office in 2012 with a clear appreciation for the underlying competitive advantage New Bedford would have when the European-based wind industry reached American shores. And he made it clear to everyone from day one that he intended to hustle, to compete, and to do whatever it took for New Bedford to seize a rare generational opportunity for its economic resurgence. He did his homework and immediately took a deep dive into how European ports from Hull to Bremerhaven positioned themselves over the past 3 decades of wind energy's development. The mayor's conclusion? New Bedford had multiple cards to play that most other cities on the eastern seaboard simply did not. A local economy already oriented to marine industrial uses, an experienced maritime workforce like no other in America, and a good old geographic advantage as the closest full-service industrial port to the largest cluster of wind energy areas in America. But that vision is only part of why, a decade later, we are all here in this room today. The mayor has also taken the actions and the risks necessary to position New Bedford for the unique status it enjoys today. He helped foster a strong consensus among local leaders in support of the opportunity that wind energy represented. He advocated tirelessly for resources at the state and federal level that have modernized the port's infrastructure to the tune of more than $1 billion in public and private port investment. And as important, he made sure the city and the port created new institutions and organizational capacity needed to be an effective partner to the industry, including my own organization, the New Bedford Ocean Cluster, as well as the New Bedford Port Authority and the New Bedford Regeneration Committee and others. Finally, I want to add that the mayor, for all his vision and determination to seize the offshore wind opportunity, has always been committed to guiding the development of offshore wind so that it coexists alongside the commercial fishing industry here in New Bedford. His own family has roots in commercial fishing, and he worked his way through college, canning scallops on the waterfront, so he is a public official who has been intimately familiar with the industry his entire life. The mayor's aspiration, plain and simple, is to see New Bedford lead and to be a center for excellence for both industries. For 23 consecutive years, New Bedford has been the unrivaled top-grossing commercial fishing port in America, and the mayor fully intends for the winning streak to continue. He is steadfast and determined in his vision for creating an integrated ocean economy and is stepping up to provide the leadership needed for all our maritime industries to succeed. So without further ado, it is an honor to welcome Mayor John Mitchell to the podium to kick off this morning's program. Mayor?
All right, good morning, everybody. Good morning. Great to see everyone here. This is really exciting. Year 2 of the NBOC's convening of industry players, and I wish to go no further in my remarks but to thank Jen Downing for her leadership of the NBOC. It's hard, as many of you know, especially the small business people here know how hard it is to gain liftoff to a new enterprise. It is hard. There's just so much you have to do in the way of building structure and evangelizing and just running something, and Jen has done that. The NBOC has a presence now, and as you listen to the litany of the sponsors, and thank you all for your support, what's different now is you feel like these are industry sponsors. They're here, they're active, and they're making their presence felt, and it's not an accident. Jen, I just can't thank you enough. I just ask everybody to join me in a round of applause for Jen's work. A few other people I do want to recognize. I want to recognize the chair of the NBOC, former Mayor John Bullard, has worn many hats over the years, but he understands this stuff very well, and we have a running joke that He's doing such a great job that we're going to double his salary, which is zero. John, thank you. I want to thank also their partner in crime, Gordon Carr, who just came in, director of the Port of New Bedford, for all the great work that he's doing in concert with them. And of course, our state partners, Emily Reichert, the CEO of the Mass Clean Energy Center, and Bruce Carlisle, who heads up the CEC's offshore wind team. I don't know if Bruce is here as yet, but he's in the back somewhere, milling around. But anyway, we work very closely with the CEC, and it is a terrific and fruitful partnership. So we're among friends here, and although I've seen many of you from time to time in the collective work we do to promote the Port of New Bedford and to advance offshore wind and other maritime industries, I thought I'd take just a few minutes to update you about where we are right now, as well as just to maybe just offer a few thoughts that might help tie in the agenda that you have ahead of you in the next couple of days. So we've been at this work for a while, of course, and as we discuss offshore wind, I can't help but think of the trips that we went on to Europe years ago. I've been in office for a while, and yeah, I start to cringe when there's a suggestion that I'm a career politician. I don't see myself that way, but eventually you can't avoid that kind of moniker. But we've been at it for a while. And it started off in an evangelical phase. It was our going to Europe with business leaders to get people, get eyes on what was happening there and what could happen here in New Bedford if we played our cards right. And so we had those trips, and we brought folks over to places like Cuxhaven, Germany, and Esbjerg, Denmark, and then later to Hull and Grimsby, England, to see the work being done in older ports to advance offshore wind and what it meant in the way of attracting investment to these places, and then ultimately the job creation that came with it. And I see people in the audience, a few of you who went on those trips way back when. I have to confess, at the time, I really didn't know much about it. I think I wasn't, as I think a lot of you know, I was not in municipal government beforehand, so it was all sort of new to me, but I had the sense that it would be a good fit here in New Bedford, so we drove it, but it altogether felt like it was this European thing that felt good, kind of like Nutella. Like, I don't know where that stuff comes from, but it's like, yeah, it has potential here in the US, and so too with offshore wind. So we pursued it, and we understood, and as we did, we kept coming back to, like, why the effort? And the effort was driven by this. If you grew up here, if you grew up in an older industrial city anywhere in the Northeast or the Midwest in the last 50 years, you can appreciate this. There are certain parts of America that have been left behind by the changes in the world economy. And these are places that were thriving cities where people that had strong neighborhoods, where people could grow up and didn't have to leave. They could pursue opportunity for their families, and they wouldn't think twice about moving away. That loss and the very palpable loss of seeing jobs go away and factories close over the years is something that is collectively painful. And in a place that has seen decades of decline, really from the Great Depression onward, you start to have this feeling sets in that decline is this permanent state of affairs. That's just the way it is. It's always going to be that way. It's inexorable. And for me, one of the reasons I ran for mayor was to sort of defy that conventional wisdom, that at least this place, the place that I cared about most, didn't have to be that way, that we could be a place that could pull itself back up. And that's not an easy thing to do in an American economy where capital tends to gravitate to the major metropolitan areas. If you're not one of those cities, or if you're not a satellite of those cities, you've got work to do. And so the idea of offshore wind fit nicely in that, because here was this maritime business that could fit into this maritime place And it was a maritime business that was very heavily capitalized and was creating jobs in Europe, and there was no obvious reason why that couldn't happen here. So that's why we've pursued it, and we've pursued it aggressively. And the goal ultimately is for us to have this thriving, sustainable industry cluster that grows itself. And that's the work we're in. So I want to just talk for a couple of minutes about the overall strategy and how it's played out. I think I have a couple of slides. I have 3 slides. Promise, just 3 slides. I don't know if we're ready. Slides, yes. So I have to say, as I see these slides come up, one thing I have to say is when I was a teenager, I worked as a janitor here and in high school, and I used to man that room and show films about whaling, and I screwed it up all the time. So I'm really, really grateful for the seamless transition here. But when we talk about cluster development, the guru of industry clusters is Harvard Business School professor Michael Porter, and who's been very influential in informing the way that cities go about economic development here in the U.S. and around the world. And cluster development is about playing up strengths. It's like the song. It's like what Muhammad Ali used to say: accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative. Play to your strengths. Don't try to be everything. Play up the strengths, and that's what we do. And so our strengths here are all in the way of what happens here on the water. Those are New Bedford's most competitive advantages. That's where they lie. We're the biggest fishing port in America. We have this huge fishing cluster and fish processing cluster that's unrivaled in the United States. And that can translate into something big, given also the geographic advantages that you heard Jen mention, and the seafaring workforce that we have. All these things add up. These are the ingredients of success, I would submit, in offshore wind, among other things. So if we go to the second slide, this is what we've been doing. And I'm just going to tick through these items really quickly. The top one is to construct useful infrastructure. And I say useful and relevant infrastructure that works well. It suits the needs of industry, of many industries, and is versatile enough to accommodate the changes the industry might undergo. And I want to go back to this in a second, because I have my third and last slide is going to speak specifically to this. But the point about building infrastructure for a maritime industry, for a maritime sector, is to ensure that there is an industrial base that works, and everything is built on top of that. Preparing the workforce. I don't know if anybody from Bristol Community College is here, but we have America's first offshore wind training institute right on our waterfront, and it's all ready to go. They've started work already, but that's a big thing. The NOWI, N-O-W, National Offshore Wind Institute. I like to say NOWI or never, and it kind of gets old after a while. But that is ready to go, ready to prepare a workforce, along with our comprehensive high school, New Bedford High, and all the comprehensive high schools in the region, along with New Bedford Vocational. They're all gearing up for workforce training, and in a position now to launch. The marketing and convening, that's what the MBOC is charged in part with doing. That's what we're doing right now. You got to be a place, if you're going to be a leader, you're going to be a cluster, you got to be a place where people convene. Cultivating innovation and entrepreneurship. You'll hear from Emily about the Innovation Center that's launching, which we're really excited about and working with them on, plus all the work that the MBOC is doing to convene marine tech and other industries that will play a role here. Developing key partnerships, that's what this is about. Policy support from the federal and state government. Again, we have terrific partners in state government. Every governor, the last 3 governors, have been very supportive of our efforts. And the Mass Clean Energy Center has been at the tip of the state's spear. And then there's a whole lot of work to do, and the next 2 points are really related. From the federal policy support from the federal and state government, as well as protecting the fishing industry's interest. These things are of a piece. New Bedford is a fishing port. We will remain a fishing port. Offshore wind is not replacing fishing. Offshore wind is complementing fishing, and one of the primary points that we've made over and over again, and I think people are getting it, is that fishing is an asset, is a competitive existence. The proximity of fishing to offshore wind, it is an advantage for offshore wind. Being near fishermen, being near fishing businesses, but also being part of a discussion about the two that exist, how the two can coexist successfully together is really important, and you got to be close together. So we don't think, and call me the most naive politician in America, but we don't think there is a natural conflict. We think there is, if anything else, an opportunity for the two to work together synergistically so that everybody's better off. That's what we're up to. And then the last thing is, and I talk about, we talk about older industrial cities in the US that are trying to find their way. One of the things that we do that I suspect a lot of others don't is that we just talk about competition. We will beat everybody. In an age where collaboration is this touchstone concept, that's all great, but honestly, we're geared up to beat everybody. I make no apologies for it. That's the way we are oriented, and that's the way it has to be, because we have to hustle, and we do. So I just want to show the last slide because I want to touch on infrastructure. So this is a reflection of our hustling. This is a reflection of all the activity that I just talked about. So there are lots of ports that want to get in the offshore wind business, and lots of them are on the East Coast now. That's natural, given the scale of what is likely to come, or we hope comes. But this is what we've been doing for the last decade, and going out a few years. There's no port in America that is being built out like this. New Bedford has not been built out like this since it was the center of America's whaling, the center of the world's whaling industry. And this didn't happen by accident. This happened because we planned, we understood our competitive advantages and planned around them. We advocated, and we were opportunistic. When money became available, we raised our hands and we said, we're ready. And so this is what's happening. $1.2 billion in investment, mostly publicly funded, but some major privately funded investments as well, most prominently the Foss Terminal, as well as the Shoreline Marine Terminal, which are terrific projects that are going to support the offshore wind industry in a big way. But this is what's happening in New Bedford, and we'll make sure we distribute this slide to everybody, because this is going to put New Bedford in a highly competitive position for decades. More to come still. We never tell anybody we're done, right? But this is, we've modernized the port of New Bedford. We've taken advantage of the fact that we have this special permitting arrangement, because New Bedford Harbor has the dubious distinction of being a marine Superfund site, but that gives us, the silver lining to that is it gives us the opportunity to sort of skip a whole lot of federal permitting that every other port in America is subjected to. But this is where we are. As we look back at this time, people are going to say, "Wow, that's when New Bedford took its great leap forward." So we're proud of that, and I think if there's anything, I hope that folks take away from this conference is that New Bedford's doing something that nobody else is doing, and if you want to do business here, this is a really good reason to do it. I mention all this. So let me just offer up a couple of concluding thoughts. There are, seems to me, a couple of object lessons here. The first is, I think we are, and I would proudly say that we are showing that a turnaround of an older industrial city can be done. It's not easy. Not every city has an opportunity. Not every city, like us, has competitive advantages that they can leverage and play up and make things happen. But it can be done. And again, we do it because we want to create opportunity for our residents ultimately. We don't want kids to leave high school and never come back. We don't want people to feel like their city is declining. We don't want people to feel like there's no hope. That's the business we're in, and we're proving that it can be done in the United States, which is, I think, really important, because if you look around the U.S., you drew a political map of the U.S., as people are doing these days, you can map out where these cities are, and there are some really significant political divides along those lines. And so for us, this is about making us part of the mainstream American economy in a place where there is opportunity. So that's one thing, and we are at that work all the time. The second thing I'll say is this. It didn't happen overnight. And it did, and over the last 12 years, there have been lots of false starts, as we all know, in the offshore wind industry, ranging from the challenges in the financial markets, the supply chains, the permitting issues, the political winds blowing back and forth, all those things. And we stuck with it. There is a lot to be said for persistence, and I would suggest to you as this conference happens, I suspect there may be a conversation or two about the current political environment. We've been hard at work here in New Bedford with our heads down, but I understand there's a presidential election coming up. I think a lot of people are holding their breaths right now, and what I'd say to all of you is just keep coming back to the fundamentals. Why is this industry going to roll out in the United States ultimately? And the reason is climate change isn't going to be solved anytime soon. There is growing demand for electricity in the United States and beyond, and particularly for renewable electricity. There's an enormous untapped potential for renewable energy right off of our shores in close proximity to major population centers. There has been a whole lot of capital spent, American-based capital spent in the industry now. There are a whole lot of unions involved in the industry as well, and a whole lot of people now working in offshore wind. So the political dynamics have also shifted with respect to offshore wind, I would submit. And as much as some of the debate around offshore wind gets caught up in the national political discussion, I saw the other day we had a protest in which some woman dressed up as a whale out here, and I was like, what struck me was like, did anybody tell her it might be a little bit risky to dress up in New Bedford as a whale? But that's all noise. And what I'd submit to all of you is keep your eye on the ball. We have to collectively keep our eye on the ball. This industry will play out. It'll be successful. It'll be successful here. It'll be successful alongside the success of the fishing industry if we continue to work at it and persist and not get distracted by stuff that really doesn't matter. I hope you have a great conference this week. Enjoy yourselves, enjoy the city, and enjoy the time in the Whaling Museum. It's a terrific cultural institution, and I'm sure I'll see you out there. Thanks, everybody.
Please welcome Dr. Emily Reichert, CEO at Massachusetts Clean Energy Center.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here with you this morning at the New Bedford Whaling Museum. I have to say this is one of my favorite museums in the Commonwealth. I most recently brought my parents here, who are from Arizona. That's where I grew up. And it's just history that if you live in other parts of the country, you don't know the strength and the wonderful heritage that is part of the DNA of a city like this. So just really glad to be in New Bedford. I'm Emily Reichert. I serve as the CEO of the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, otherwise known as MassCEC. And I wanted to start today just by thanking Mayor Mitchell for welcoming us to New Bedford, but also for his leadership and vision. So New Bedford is very lucky to have a mayor that is so forward-thinking, and so I just want to credit him with that today. And Jennifer, I just want to thank you and your team for bringing us all together and for the important work that you and your team do to build and nurture this ecosystem. The New Bedford Ocean Cluster means so much to this community and the economy here, and just really thank you for all the work that you do. Like MassCEC, an important part of the cluster's mission is to convene, to bring leaders together from the private sector, the public sector, academic institutions, to strengthen New Bedford's status as a forward-thinking blue economy while respecting the long-time leadership in the maritime industries that the city represents. Because when we collaborate and develop a shared vision of what's possible, that's when we make the progress that allows us to overcome the challenges we face and create solutions that work for all of us. And when New Bedford thrives, so does Massachusetts. Speaking of progress, though, I'm here to share a few updates about the Commonwealth's recent progress in our growing clean energy and climate tech sector. And it's my goal to leave you a bit excited and hopeful about the work that we have ahead of us. Before I do, though, I'm just going to give a little background on Mass CEC because I see some new faces in the audience today. So the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center is a quasi-state government economic development agency, and our charge is really to build the climate tech and clean energy industry across the state. Our work spans 4 main areas of climate impact. First, we help new climate-focused businesses grow faster by supporting a vibrant community of researchers, startups, and established industry players, creating an ecosystem where they can connect and thrive. We work to tackle barriers to the widespread use of clean energy and climate technology in buildings, in transportation, and our grid. We're working with all of you to build a cutting-edge offshore wind industry, marshaling world-class ports in New Bedford and Salem, while building a strong supply chain and a trained workforce. And we're growing a diverse and talented clean energy workforce by supporting community-based organizations, labor, schools, and employers committed to a sustainable future for all. Mass CEC is proud to be part of the New Bedford community and the larger Massachusetts blue economy innovation ecosystem. Mass CEC owns and operates the New Bedford Marine Commerce Terminal, a 30-acre purpose-built facility for the construction, assembly, and deployment of offshore wind projects. The New Bedford Terminal has been engineered to be the most versatile heavy-lift cargo facility in the nation. Currently operating as the staging and pre-assembly port for Vineyard Wind 1, the terminal is an essential piece of infrastructure to meet the state's climate goals. That's why, in August, Mass CEC announced plans to expand and improve the terminal to maintain and increase the Commonwealth's competitiveness in the emerging offshore wind industry. This expansion and improvement project will support the demand for port facilities that can deploy larger, heavier turbine parts as proposed by many offshore wind developers. The project includes the acquisition of 4 properties abutting the terminal, the replacement of an existing legacy bulkhead with a new high-bearing capacity quayside, development of additional heavy lift storage area, and the construction of a new office and warehouse building. When completed, the project will expand the available heavy lift storage area by 5 acres to a total of 26 contiguous acres. And my team wants me to tell you that there are more details about our plans that can be found on our website, and we expect this terminal expansion to be completed by December 2026. The evolution of the New Bedford Marine Commerce Terminal will strengthen Massachusetts' offshore wind leadership, provide critical support for the deployment of gigawatts of renewable offshore wind, and serve as an essential port asset for the emerging United States offshore wind industry well into the future. Mass CEC invests in offshore wind infrastructure, but we're also investing in the people that are going to power this industry. As Massachusetts Energy and Environmental Secretary Rebecca Tepper likes to say, it's the workers that are going to be the heroes of our clean energy transformation. This past year, we've awarded $6.8 million in grants for offshore wind workforce infrastructure, recruitment, and training in Massachusetts. These grants that were awarded through our Offshore Wind Works program will support colleges and universities, businesses, labor unions, and nonprofits that are advancing preparedness and capabilities of our offshore wind workforce. The funding also supports the local manufacturing of offshore wind components and the related supply chain. These investments in infrastructure and people are especially important given the Commonwealth's offshore wind selections announced in September. As Jennifer mentioned, the 2,878 megawatts selected from 3 projects will power the equivalent of 1.6 million homes in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. This is New England and Massachusetts' largest offshore wind selection so far, and it represents nearly 20% of the Commonwealth's electric demand. Think about that, 20%. All 3 projects will have an operational and a maintenance presence here in New Bedford. That's including South Coast Wind, which will use New Bedford Marine Commerce Terminal as a marshaling site. This selection is a significant step forward for a clean energy transformation here in Massachusetts and will make us more energy independent while boosting our regional economies. Before I wrap up, I want to share one more note that the mayor mentioned, an important project that we're working on. Mass CEC is moving forward with plans to establish an Ocean Renewable Energy Innovation Center here in New Bedford. This facility will be a testing and demonstration center. It will be a research center, and it will allow co-working and convening space all in one. It will bring together entrepreneurs, investors, small businesses, academics, and be available to the local community. The South Coast region is already a blue economy leader, and our team at Mass CEC is confident that this region, anchored by New Bedford, can be a national and global hub for ocean energy technology. This center will enhance and support New Bedford's working waterfront, stimulating the regional economy and playing a critical role in our goal to become the climate innovation lab for the world here in the Commonwealth. Mass CEC looks forward to working closely with the City of New Bedford to bring this project to fruition. As you know, in Massachusetts, we set an ambitious agenda to be the national hub for the East Coast's emerging offshore wind industry, an industry that is absolutely essential to the Commonwealth's goal to be net zero by 2050. And while we know offshore wind will become our largest source of clean energy, pioneering a new industry is not without its challenges. But luckily, I know Governor Healy, Lieutenant Governor Driscoll, and many others in the administration are committed to building this industry in the Commonwealth. And being a pioneer in a new industry, we just have to remember it's no small feat, and we should keep this in mind when challenges arise. We have a lot of work ahead of us, but it's work that will improve the quality of life for millions of people and set Massachusetts on the path to a brighter future. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference today.
Please welcome Commissioner Chief Development Officer for Avon Grid.
Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I also want to extend my thanks to Mayor Mitchell for his leadership, and to Jen Downing and to Emily Reichard for all you're doing here in New Bedford and nationally and globally. It's so fitting to be here at the Whaling Museum. This is such an important space that testifies to the history of New Bedford, but it's perfect that we're here because we're all really writing the next chapter in New Bedford's history to transition from whaling to clean energy. And so I'm very glad to be here with all of you. I'd like to zoom out a little bit and talk about where we are nationally and globally in the offshore wind industry, some challenges that we've faced and how we've risen to that challenge, a little bit about the present and a little bit about the future. But I'll start first just by talking about who we are. We are Avangrid. We're the country's third largest clean energy developer, and we are the subsidiary of Iberdrola Group, which is one of the world's largest clean energy developers globally. I heard an amazing statistic a couple of days ago that in the last 8 months of 2024, Avangrid's onshore wind and solar projects have generated 15,000 gigawatt hours of clean electricity into this country. That is a lot of power, and to put it in a carbon perspective, that's the equivalent of taking about 23 billion pounds of carbon out of the atmosphere and curtailing the burning of about 12 billion pounds of coal just in the last 8 months. And that's using onshore wind and solar, and we're just getting started on offshore wind, which will greatly, by many factors, increase the amount of clean energy that we are providing. So we are involved in 4 projects, one as a 50% owner with Vineyard Offshore, which is the Vineyard Wind 1 project being built as we speak. Just down the road, we are using the New Bedford Marine Commerce Terminal. That project is proceeding with construction, and when built and operational, will be the nation's first large-scale offshore wind farm. So we are so proud of the project, proud of all the leadership that has gotten us to this point, and particularly proud that here in New Bedford, we're putting a lot of people to work. This project was the first offshore wind project to sign a project labor agreement to use union labor for our work. At the time, we thought we would employ about 500 union workers on this project. Well, we were wrong. We've actually employed about 1,000 union workers on this project, and we're not done with construction yet. So this is a project that's really bringing clean energy and jobs here in this community, and we're excited about that. When we get done with that project, we have another one in the hopper, the New England Wind 1 project, which will, like Vineyard Wind, supply enough energy for about 400,000 homes and businesses in Massachusetts. We have almost all of our permits for that project. We have our supply chain largely locked down. We were fortunate to win a bid award in September. So if everything goes well, we hope to start construction on that project next year. And then after that, a few years behind, is New England Wind 2, an even larger project that we hope to develop over the next coming years. And finally, we have a very large lease area in North Carolina and Virginia, and we hope to develop that as well. So from our point of view, the future of offshore wind is strong, and we intend to be a major player in developing offshore wind here in the United States, just as we've done globally. So I'd like to talk a little bit about where we are nationally and globally in the offshore wind industry. And it's a narrative of overcoming some very big challenges that we faced in the past couple of years with a combination of leadership, tenacity, resilience, and innovation. So the challenge was this: starting in about 2014, the offshore wind industry was in a position where it was scaling up. It was doing technology innovation, and costs were coming down every year. And it was obviously a really good trend line to be on. And many people, including myself, figured we're on this downward trend line. We're going to just stay on this trend line forever. And I think it's a little bit of an element of human nature that when you're on a trend line, you just expect it to continue, and you can't really imagine that it will actually end. But end it did. With the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which wreaked havoc on steel markets, which is an essential component of offshore wind, with some of the worst inflation we've experienced in 40 years, with a dramatic increase in interest rates, the costs, and probably most importantly, the decision by European countries to accelerate offshore wind as they realize a need to wean themselves off of gas from Russia. So all these geopolitical factors conspired to change the narrative from costs coming down to costs going dramatically up. And it was quite a shakeout. There were projects that were under contract, including some of ours, that were no longer economically viable to build. We saw some companies, not us, but some companies abandon their projects altogether, take massive impairments on their assets. Some players have pulled out of the offshore wind industry. And for the last couple of years, people have worried that this industry that just was getting started, what was going to happen? Was it going to stall out? And the good news is, now that we're in 2024, I think we've come out of those challenges through a combination of things. First, leadership at the federal level. The Inflation Reduction Act is an important element in providing federal financial support for these projects to make them continue to be cost effective for ratepayers. I think the Biden-Harris administration deserves a lot of credit. They have permitted 13 gigawatts of offshore wind in the last 4 years, which is a large amount of permitting. And you know, the federal government gets knocked for acting slowly sometimes. I've been one of those people. But that's an impressive track record of getting the projects permitted and through the pipeline. We've seen at the state level, multiple states continuing to use their purchasing power through procurements to keep the industry going. Certainly in Massachusetts with the multi-state bid that we just had, I'll talk a little bit more about that, but we've seen it in New York, New Jersey, Maryland and Delaware are expected to do some major procurements, and next week, I'll talk a little bit more about that, we're going to be leasing large areas off the Gulf of Maine for additional areas for offshore wind. There are also quite a lot of proposals pending to have shared transmission systems, which really will create efficiencies and lower the costs for offshore wind. So we've really overcome a lot of challenges, and now at the end of 2024, I feel like I can safely say the fears we had about offshore wind stalling out didn't materialize. The industry is strong and it's growing. But obviously we face a big challenge ahead, which is we've got to get the politics out of offshore wind. It should not be a political football. It is a climate necessity, and for many areas of the country, it is an energy reliability necessity to keep the lights on, to provide electricity for these growing demands, data centers, electric vehicles, heat pumps. This is something we have to do. There's no alternative to it, and the sooner we can get the politics out of it and get a consensus that this is needed, the better from my point of view. So I want to talk a little bit about the multi-state procurement that we just went through. This was an example of Massachusetts and Connecticut and Rhode Island innovating to face this challenge that I told you about. And the idea of it was, rather than have each state procure relatively small amounts of clean energy, offshore wind, they would pool their resources together, encourage projects of bigger scale, and also encourage resources to be invested in a regional way as opposed to an individual way. And from my perspective, the multi-state worked. The way it was set up was that if you wanted to bid into any of the states, you had to at least offer all the states the opportunity to purchase part of the electricity that you're generating, all at the same price and more or less under the same terms and conditions. So this was a smart move by the states. I think it worked very well, and certainly hats off to the Commonwealth in particular for selecting 2.6 gigawatts of electricity. That is a lot of electricity. Our project, New England Wind 1, Vineyard Offshore, and Ocean Winds, and together 2.6 gigawatts, really, really impressive. Now, I know the mayor is no longer here, but I do want to thank the mayor because he, I believe, supported all three projects in the comment periods that were done. Jen, you were also a supporter of the projects, and we appreciate that. I think it was very important for the state bid evaluation team to hear from New Bedford that they wanted these projects and were excited about having them. So we're grateful for that support. And I want to make sure everyone understands that our New England One project was very centered in New Bedford. And again, I know the mayor's not here, but I want everyone to know that we met with the mayor a couple of months before submitting our bid, and we gave him an overview of what we were planning on doing in New Bedford. And he was cordial and supportive, but a little underwhelmed by the level of our initial commitment. I saw on his slide, he said, make no apologies, compete vigorously. Well, that's what happened. He urged us to up our commitments to New Bedford before we submitted our bid, and we did. We committed to a construction and logistics hub at Foss Marine Terminal. That's going to happen. We committed to an operation and maintenance hub in New Bedford. That's going to happen, and I want to point out that's very important because there's a burst of short-term jobs for offshore wind during the construction phase, but the long-term jobs are found in the operation and maintenance over time. So we've committed to doing that operation here in New Bedford. And finally, we are partnering with a company known as Liftra, which manufactures specialty equipment for the offshore wind industry, to set up a manufacturing facility here in New Bedford. So we're really excited about that. We will be purchasing the initial output from this facility to give them an incentive to be here, but they are really excited to be in New Bedford. We met with the CEO and we asked him what his goal was, and he said, I want to be doing manufacturing for offshore wind in the center of the offshore wind industry in the United States. And we said, well, then you should be in New Bedford, and he agreed, and the mayor and Jen and others have been part of that. So we're super excited about that. The facility will start relatively small, but their goal is to get bigger and bigger. So I think adding manufacturing to New Bedford as another element of the offshore wind industry is a really big win. We also are funding the NBOC, that's part of our bid equipment. We're helping to fund this new center of excellence that Emily Reichart talked about. We're providing UMass Dartmouth with funding for environmental reporting and job tracking. And we're involved in something called the Pivot, which is Procurement Innovation Vitality Opportunity Trust, to help bring the local supply chain here to New Bedford. So we've really made New Bedford a centerpiece of our program for New England Wind One, and we're very proud of that. So now I want to talk about from where we were to where we're going. And I want to talk about where the industry is moving. So if you zoom out a little bit, most of the offshore wind facilities in the world and in the nation have been built in kind of a sweet spot area. Areas off the coast that are shallow, so you can use what's called fixed bottom technology, that have high wind speeds, and that are located relatively close to population centers. So it's the perfect location for offshore wind. Our projects are an example of that, but there are spots like this all across the world. But the key thing to understand is we're actually running out of those places, both internationally and here in the United States. So to keep the offshore wind industry viable, we're going to need to transition from fixed bottom offshore wind facilities to floating offshore wind. That's where the industry is going over time. And interestingly, New England again has another opportunity to lead here, because next Tuesday, the federal agency BOEM will be leasing a large amount of areas in the Gulf of Maine that will all be done with floating offshore wind, because they're too deep for conventional fixed bottom technology. But these areas have excellent wind speeds. They're relatively shallow. They're too deep for fixed bottom, but they're like 200 meters deep, as opposed to, for example, in California, 1,000 meters deep. So these are very likely to be the first places in the United States where floating technology actually gets deployed. So I think this is a really important development. I think we should all be watching what happens at that auction. I hope there will be quite a lot of interest. This is an opportunity to supply a lot of power for the New England region. And that power, we need it. The ISO New England, which runs our electric grid, has said we need about 34 gigawatts of offshore wind in place by 2050 to keep the lights on and meet the goals that the states have set for themselves for climate change. Well, those fixed bottom leases get you about 10 of those 34 gigawatts. So where's the other 24 gigawatts going to come from? A lot of it's going to come from floating, and that Gulf of Maine lease alone could account for about 12 gigawatts. So that's where we're going, and I would say for New Bedford, which has done such an incredible job to position itself as the offshore wind hub, it needs to think about this new technology and how it can remain relevant and preeminent as the technology changes. And I have no doubt with the leadership of Mayor Mitchell and Jen Downing and the commitment that all of you have to making sure that New Bedford is at the center of offshore wind, I have no doubt you will rise to that challenge. So I hope you have a very productive conference. I'm sure there's a lot of important issues to be bandied about, and I hope you come out with some solutions that will not only grow the offshore wind industry, but will grow the role that New Bedford plays in moving it along. So thank you very much.